Thank you, Blake, for your talk, returning us to our core mission here. Does anyone have a question at this time? As Judy said, just unmute yourself and ask.
Stan, this is Mike. I'll go first. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mike.
Okay, good. I wanted to ask you that in this morning we had our coffee hour during this 21 days Zen challenge, and somebody made the comment about hindrances and that sometimes the more we practice, or as we kind of commit ourselves to a practice, like in the Zen challenge, for instance, that that the hindrances almost become more powerful for a time. That the things that are distracting us from practice, or the habits, the quote unquote bad habits we have, whatever those may be, almost gain some energy initially when you start doing more practice. Anything about that you can share, whether you found that to be true too, or ways of dealing with that?
Yes, I think that's a common experience. Uh, Not so much with our regular day-to-day practice, um, but when you're doing longer, more intensive practice. And so a lot of people now are doing, the 21 day challenge and practicing for making a commitment to practice for a long period of time. Um, and then a little apprehension appears. Oh my God, I'm going to be doing this all day for 7 days or for 90 days. And then, yeah, this mind can appear. Um, and of course, the remedy is simply return to whatever your practice technique is, whatever your schedule is, for whatever kind of practice you're doing. Then these emotional reactions, which is what they are, kind of fearfulness, actually, that you're kind of losing autonomy. You can't do whatever you want whenever you want to do it. And because you've made this commitment to practice, that gradually subsides. And perhaps you've had that experience yourself. So don't be alarmed by any such feelings. Um, don't necessarily put up a lot of resistance. Simply calmly proceed with what you're doing moment to moment in your practice. The practice tends to take care of itself once it's started. The techniques that we use in our meditation practice go back thousands of years, actually, and can be trusted. So if you have, trust in, your true self and trust in the practice, then these hindrances tend to die down and die down and die down. That's not to say they might not come back um, as your extended practice continues. Um, our small mind is always reasserting itself. Hey, what about me? You know, and a kind of fear can set in. But just as with any distraction, when you're practicing, your mind will wander off. Just bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. Always keep the energy in your center. For me, that's the fundamental technique whenever anything like that appears. Just put it down here. Then it can actually help you. It can turn into energy for meditation. Uh, so you've heard me say this before, most of you. That's that centers the Tangen, the energy garden, and it's like our psychological compost heap. Any kind of garbage appears. just put it down there. It'll become digested and become energy for practice. So a bad situation is a good situation if you use it properly. So thank you for your question.
Hi, Stan. Oh,
Yes.
hi, John Taylor. Good to see you.
Hi.
I don't know where to start other than things have changed a lot. I'm having a lot of trouble with my health. I don't want to get into all the details, but my life is going to change a lot. I'm looking at 2 surgeries, plus I'm post-COVID and struggling a lot with that. So there's a lot of uncertainty. So when the talk was about worry,
Yeah.
it brought up a lot. It brought up a lot because there's genuine uncertainty, in terms of financial and what I'll even be able to do physically, what I'll be able to do in terms of interacting with my family. Uh, Practice has always been a really important part of or has been a very important part of my life for a long time. But what I'm finding so much is just sitting, and I sit, quite a bit, and I sit as much as I can with people and other groups, and I plan to continue. It's just at this right now, I'm feeling, maybe because all this is very new, the latest stuff with surgeries I'm looking at, I'm feeling very hopeless and very sad and very angry with myself for not being able to provide in the way I feel I have been able to in the past. And I guess I don't know if I really have a question other than I want to just keep working with it the way we're talking about working, and hope that whatever comes of it comes of it. So thanks.
I understand your situation. I've been through something like that myself, a very serious illness with a strong possibility of death. So when something like that appears in your life, as maybe you are discovering, it can be used as motivation for practice. Of course, you're depending on other people during this. Your physicians, your family, and people will be taking care of you. And of course, I had wonderful people taking care of me, not just my wife, Judy, but all the physicians and the nurses and so forth. It was also important to me to maintain practice during a period of especially hospitalization. And we were talking about this yesterday with someone who practices in the Quantum School of Zen, who lives in Taiwan and was organizing a film festival having to do with death, and invited Judy and myself to maybe give some talks during that festival. And so I was recalling yesterday, talking about this, the importance of a strong, focused practice during periods like this. And it can take many forms. It can take, any form, that's congenial to you and your situation. For me, the practice centered around a statue, actually, of Junjie Bosal, who's not very well known in this country, but in Asia. As soon as I showed the statue to Myung-hae from Taiwan, she said, "Oh yes, so 18 hands and arms, So I developed a strong connection, with the statue, and it was in the hospital room, and I was doing the mantra of Junjie Bosal. So make your practice very definite, very strong, as strong as you can. Find something. Maybe ask for help from somebody more experienced. Well, what kind of practice can I do? So it can actually be tailored, to your current situation, and it's still our basic practice. But it can acquire a form that can really help you and really see you through periods like this. That's been my own experience anyway. And of course, I wish you, um, all good fortune in this. The title of this that Judy and I suggested for our presentation is The Great Work of Life and Death. And Judy actually reminded me that, where does that come from? Since Sinem was always saying it. At the end of all of the letters that he wrote, many of which, by the way, were dictated to me, and I'm writing them down. He was always writing letters. He always ended, I hope you only go straight, which is clear like space. You know, soon get enlightenment and soon finish the great work. No, say soon finish the great work of life and death, get enlightenment, and save all beings from suffering. And that last part is very important. So, you know, that's our vow. Even when we're sick, you know, not to lose our direction. Our practice is for all beings, you know, not just maybe help me get through this sickness practice, but for all beings. So that's strong practice. So thank you for bringing this up. It's nice to connect with you, John.
Thank you, Stan. Thanks so much.
Are there any other questions?
Stan, this is Jennifer.
Yes.
When you've talked before, this was several weeks ago, you were responding to a question about kong-ans practice and how, you know, once during a sitting, how you bring up your homework and you just look at it. And you look at all the, I don't know if you said this or if I just thought it, but looking at it like a jewel, like looking at all the different facets of it. And my question, I thought of this while you were talking, is how can you look at a kong-ans without devolving into trying to analyze it and think it? Because that's where I always want to go, is it just, I start thinking and try to solve it.
Yeah, that's the natural tendency. So I was actually quoting Sosan, the great Korean Zen master from 400 years ago, his book, The Mirror of Zen. So it's his kind of advice on meditation. He says, as if you have a precious gem, maybe a pearl, doesn't have to have facets really, but you know, a pearl will reflect the light this way, reflect the light that way, in the palm of your hand. And you're just looking at it, turning it this way, turning it that way, you know, and you just keep looking at it. So that kind of mind is not a thinking mind. It's a direct perception, looking at it directly. Yeah. So turning it this way and turning it that way doesn't mean, you know, analyzing it, you know, into its parts. We, especially academics, such as you are, tend to overthink. You know, we're trained to analyze, to dissect, to look at all the parts, to put it all back together in some clever way that becomes a dissertation or a paper. Yeah. So that's not the mind to work on a kong-ans with. It's the mind of direct perception, the same mind, no different, you know, than what we're doing when we're sitting. So we simply perceive, you know, whatever, you know, the technique is. Maybe we're just perceiving the breath. Maybe it's a phrase that we're holding. Just perception. That kind of mind results in clarity and in wholeness and in a kind of direct connection with what's in the palm of your hand. So I encourage you, certainly to work on a kong-ans, not simply to file it away until it's almost time for an interview and then say, oh God, what am I going to come up with now? That's not very productive. So I favor the technique of holding the kong-an, deliberately, not only when it happens to arise, certainly then, because, it happens to arise, probably for a very good reason, um, because you're feeling a connection with it, but also bringing it up yourself. And it's not the only way to do it, and other teachers may have different advice, but bringing up the kong-an, when you're sitting, for what I call one unit of attention. How many units of attention do you think you have during a half hour of sitting? Yeah, don't know. Mind is always coming and going. That's what I mean. So for one period of complete attention, just the kong-an. Then whatever your regular practice technique is, go back to that for the rest of the period. So experience the kong-an. It's another way of putting it. Just keeping the question, what is this? It's another way of expressing this method of working on a kong-an. Just the mind, what is this? What is this? So that's about all I can say about working on kong-ans. Main thing is just do it. Okay? It's an important part of our practice, as it's transmitted from Zen Master Sung-san. And you can, I don't seem to have it handy, yes. You all probably know this book, 365 kong-ans for everyday life. All of the classical kong-ans are here, many other kong-ans. And you get a feeling for kong-ans just by reading through the book. It's a different sort of mind, the mind that kong-ans elicit, different from our usual habitual thinking. So thank you for your question. And I think that's all the time we have. So thank you very much, all of you, for your practice and for forming this Sangha.